Hi, this is Nathan Tinzel. In this Learning Goal video, we will talk about how to use the 2SD rule to compute a 95% confidence interval using the Swimming with Dolphins dataset. The 2SD method to compute an approximate 95% confidence interval is something we've seen before. Take your observed statistic and add/subtract two standard deviations, where the standard deviation is the standard deviation of simulated statistics from our null hypothesis simulation. Applying that here, we can see in the simulation that the standard deviation is 0.188. Multiplying that by 2 gives us 0.376. So to compute an approximate 95% confidence interval, add and subtract 0.376 to 0.467. This gives us an interval from 0.091 to 0.843. Now what's really important here is that the parameter being estimated by the confidence interval is the difference in long-run probabilities of substantial improvement. So how do we interpret this interval? Individuals who swim with dolphins are between 0.091 and 0.843 more likely, at the 95% confidence level, to show substantial improvement compared to the control group. Here's one less ideal way of doing the interpretation. You could say we're 95% confident that the difference in probability of substantial improvement is between 0.091 and 0.843. What's less ideal about that interpretation is that it does not indicate the direction of the effect. When you're communicating to people who don't know statistics, you want to make sure that you are talking about which group is more likely to show improvement than the other. The first interpretation does that. The second one doesn't. Is this consistent with the test of significance? Remember before we've talked about how the confidence interval and the p-value tell us similar stories. The null hypothesis here says that the difference in probabilities is 0. When we look at the 95% confidence interval, that's a range of plausible values for the difference in probabilities. Notice that that range is 0.091 to 0.843, so 0 is not in the interval. What does this mean? It means 0 is not a plausible value for the difference in probabilities. Well, that's exactly what we saw because our p-value was 0.02. We rejected that null hypothesis. So difference in probabilities is not 0. That's not a plausible explanation. The confidence interval tells us that because 0 is not in there. The p-value tells us that because it's less than 0.05. A couple of words of caution. Keep in mind that this confidence interval is on the difference in probabilities because that's our parameter of interest now. This is different than we've seen before and can be a little bit tricky the first couple times you work on it. When you're interpreting confidence intervals, try to include a statement about directionality. Which group is bigger than the other? That really helps the reader or the person you're talking to better understand what's going on in the study. And finally, recognize that because the parameter is the difference in probabilities, whether or not 0 is in the interval tells us something important about the plausibility of the null hypothesis.